All right, everybody, back with another one. Today, we're going to take a look at a couple different things. We have the government shutdown, which is definitely top trending news. We're going to take a look at some of the comments that Trump made about his ideas to get through the government shutdown, and then some of the other financial stuff that he's putting into place. We're also going to take a look at some stuff to do with jobs, because special announcement, as long as everything goes well, we should have our first guest on this coming week. So not this episode, obviously the next one, and that will focus around trade jobs, specifically one trade job. We're going to be diving into one particular trade that is great job, super important, super necessary, and definitely not getting enough people to get into this field today, especially amongst the youth, with a lot of people going to college. We're going to start doing periodic episodes where we discuss different types of jobs, focusing on trade jobs and even white collar jobs, but jobs that are in high demand where they need people, but they can't seem to find them because people are going to school for different types of things, or people want to do other career things with their lives with the onset of AI, cryptocurrencies, podcasting and the internet and social media and all that stuff that's really gotten a lot of the spotlight for what people want to do, especially young people, Gen Z, want to do for their career life today. It's really hurt a lot of the trades because a lot of young people don't want to get into that stuff because it involves a lot of actual work. And the fun thing to do seems to be to, become an influencer, which is totally understandable. A lot of you may look at me and think that I'm doing the same thing, and that's understandable as well. Really, more this channel is for my children so that they could see a record of advice that I had for them that I'm also giving to other young people out there. Little pieces of knowledge and wisdom that I'm able to convey to them in this medium that maybe I don't have the ability to do when they're older because these topics are no longer relevant at a future time, but maybe it's stuff that could be time capsuled, that is evergreen knowledge that, might come up again, for something in the future, but maybe just a little different. They can go back and look at this record of information that I gave, and they can, use it to apply it to their life in the present day, whatever time that is. That's the main reason I'm doing this. The other reason is to sort of bring light to all of the confusion and disinformation that's out there on the internet. It's very easy to get caught up in things that are, you know, not true or half true or just completely flat out lies to deceive people. And so this is just something I'm doing to contribute, my voice to that conversation and maybe help bring a different perspective to a lot of these conversations. That said, this is not my main thing. It's not my full-time job. I have a whole career outside of this, and I focus on that primarily. This is just a secondary thing that I do. I'm very much about promoting the young people into getting careers or starting businesses that are going to benefit society as a whole and the economy and set them up for a future of success, and also set their children up, their legacy up for a future of success and wealth that they can carry on and pass through the generations, ultimately achieving the American dream. Uh, if they want to do this type of stuff, podcasting or social media in any capacity, whether it's, short videos on TikTok or whatever, that's fine. I'm not against that stuff, obviously, because I do that as well. I just want people to have their voice be heard in a way that's going to benefit society and give a message that's going to benefit society overall, not just, be another voice on the internet that's parroting something somebody else says and parroting lies that someone else put out and then just copying that and putting it out too because it gets views and hoping that they can piggyback off that. We're getting into a time where, like I said, we're headed towards idiocracy. We're getting into a time where the masses are just creating an echo chamber of voices on the internet that are just simply going to be, parroting lies back and forth to each other. and it's just gonna sound like echoes in a cave. It's gonna be a bunch of half truths or a bunch of disinformation that they're all just constantly saying out there on the internet. And when you're older, you're wise enough to know whether or not something may or may not be true, or even if you're not sure, if it doesn't actually impact your life, you really don't care, you can move on. When you're young, you're very impressionable, and it's very possible for you to get caught up in whatever, information is out there. I've seen it just recently. I've seen it time and time again throughout time, but I've seen it just recently mostly with the Charlie Kirk thing, which is still going on, where so many young people are being influenced by so many people on the internet, whether they're really, really well known and famous and have built up a following over the last 10 years or so, or whether they're new to the market and they're gaining fame because they're touching on this trending topic and they're putting out a bunch of videos that are establishing a ton of content around this topic, and they're coming up with all these different theories as to how he got killed, and they're coming up with little pieces of information that they're calling evidence, and they're creating all these theories that have no backing, or that piece of evidence is the only backing that it possibly has, but it's circumstantial at best, and they're just putting it out there, and the young people are impressionable. They're eating it up. They're believing that that's the truth, and they're running with it, and they're going out there and they're telling other people, and the lie gets spread further and further until it becomes semi-true. That's the old saying, is you tell a lie long enough and loud enough and eventually becomes true. And that's a problem. We don't want that in the future of America. We want the truth to get out. Obviously, this information is going to get out. There's always going to be such a thing as propaganda. There's always going to be such a thing as people trying to deceive each other for their own personal gain or the agenda of evil, whatever. And we're not going to stop that. But we're headed into a future if enough voices don't stand up and say, we have to question a lot of what is on the internet because it's clearly not true. And people are putting it out there and they're getting the views and they're getting the following and they're getting the engagement of people believing this stuff. Even if you read the comments a lot of times, you'll see how gullible people are. They will just agree with the person who put something out, even if it's blatantly false. And we're getting into a time now where that mind virus is actually affecting a lot of the big influences that have been around for quite a while, especially actually in the conservative space. You're seeing a lot of conservative media influencers on, online, different platforms, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all that stuff. They are being deceived by this stuff, and then they're regurgitating it out to their audiences, but they have a much bigger following. So they're actually making a substantial impact. And it's not going to end well for them because their credibility will ultimately be hurt. But it's going to do more damage to the people who believe it, because it's the same thing with old media like newspapers and TV, cable news. The retraction story always gets way less attention than the original story. And that's because the original story is shocking, it's interesting, it's breaking, and the retraction story a lot of times gets brushed under the rug because people don't like admitting they're wrong. It hurts their ego. So you're going to see a lot of people who believe these things even after they are debunked. They're going to continue on believing them. And we're headed into a time where, like I said, we're living in a world where people have different facts. Those groups of people are living by those facts as though they're the truth, even though each person's group's facts contradicts each other. They're still living as though that's the truth. So it's almost like they're living in their own worlds. And this is going to be a problem for the future youth of this nation. My goal is to make an impact so that Gen A, Gen Alpha, really is safeguarded against this. Gen Z is already halfway through their growth plan. Like, most of them are, in their early 20s now. So they're in adulthood. Gen A are the young kids that are born today that are, you know, I guess it's like 14 and under, or 12 and under, whatever the number is. And these kids are headed into that world, but worse than Gen Z, because they really are part of a generation that has no isolation and doesn't know any life outside of technology. Gen Z, their parents are Gen X. Gen X grew up in the 80s and, that whole decade of pre technology, for the most part. Obviously, they had computers, they had things like that, but they didn't have cell phones in their pocket. So they're used to parents who are not part of that whole technology world. And Gen A is not going to experience that because the millennial parents pretty much grew up with technology our whole existence. I'm the older millennial generation, so I am maybe not older, maybe more mid to older, but I am part of the earlier wave that grew up in a time where we didn't have cell phones for a while, for most of our adolescence. We didn't have, we had a family computer, but it was just one computer in a room at a desk that you would have to go to. And when you weren't at that desk on the computer, you were out doing other stuff without technology. We wanted to make a phone call. We had to go to a friend's house and pick up their phone and call our parents for whatever reason or call somebody else. Or we actually used to have to go to a payphone on the street. When I was growing up, there were a lot of payphones on the streets. They're not there anymore, but I remember making phone calls from payphones. So I still remember that time when we were pre-technology being 100% in our lives. And my wave of millennials, children, Gen A, are going to experience the last set of parents who didn't grow up with technology. But the younger millennials who are having kids now, their kids are Gen A, their parents had grown up with technology their whole lives, and their kids are going to grow up with technology even more because it's so advanced now with AI, robotics, and all this other stuff. And their parents are going to relate to them more than to life without technology because they grew up with it too. So it's going to get really difficult. I foresee this being a huge issue in society that is going to have to be resolved to some degree with government legislation, but it's also going to have to be resolved where, you know, groups of parents and generations of parents as a whole have to come to an agreement as to how they're going to raise the next generation and how much they're going to let technology influence them. A big part of that, a little bit we're going to talk about today is the younger generation is not getting into the trades and getting into real jobs because they're so fixated on, becoming the next big influencer or getting into the crypto space and becoming a crypto millionaire or, so many other things, getting into AI and things like that. And there's not going to be that much room for a whole generation of youth in just these three or four different industries. You do still need people to join construction crews and, get on a digger and dig the dirt so that they can lay, pipe. You still need people to be the plumber to, put that pipe in and set up the plumbing infrastructure. You still need cops to be able to police the streets and all these other things. And those jobs don't pay as much as those other ones, but not everybody can do one thing. You can't have everybody be the manager because the manager manages a team of people that are subordinate to him or her. And there has to be somebody to manage for the manager to even be a manager, right? So you're always going to have a hierarchy in that sense to a degree in the work world where you can't have everybody pulled into one space. People have to be spread out. So in the next episode, when we interview our guest, we're going to talk about a specific trade that is in high demand right now. People desperately need to hire people for these positions, and that pool of people to go from for hiring the youth of the generation that's coming up now, which is mostly Gen Z, some younger millennials, but mostly Gen Z that are in their early career lives now coming out of college. They need to fill those roles, and we're going to take a look at what that looks like. We're going to learn a little bit about that industry, and we're going to learn about why it's such an appealing job, why it's something that, even though it's a dirty job, like if you've ever seen Mike Rowe's show Dirty Jobs, there's tons of jobs on there that are great jobs that actually pay well. A lot of the time they pay better than other jobs in a more glamorous field where you're sitting at some, you know, desk in an office job and they give you some fancy title. And a lot of times the trade jobs, the blue collar jobs pay more than those fancy desk white collar jobs. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to get into that industry and we're going to hope to, sell the younger generation on being open to the idea of instead of going to college or maybe supplementing with college, getting into that trade as a possible career choice for them and some other trades as well. And this is going to be an ongoing series where every so often we interview a guest that is in a job that is either an interesting and unique job or a job that is in high demand but low supply, where we desperately need young people to do that, but they're so distracted by all of these other possible career choices. So that'll be the next episode. Hopefully, all goes well and the interview works out well, and we will have that up as the next episode next week. But in the meantime, we're going to jump into now taking a look at the government shutdown first. We'll take a look at something Trump is doing in response to that, which I find quite interesting and a good idea. And you can see why he did this the way he did it. And then we're going to look at something else that ties into that. And if we have time today, we'll look a little bit as a preliminary of what we're going to talk about next week. But mostly we're going to focus on the government shutdown and what's going on with Trump with that today. So just a simple search on Google with their AI assistant that gives you the rundown from pulling from various sources, a lot like ChatGPT, which I use sometimes just to get quick updates on what's going on. And then if I want to delve in further, I can do that by looking at the actual sources. So I'm not just using AI blindly, but I do also recommend it for speeding up time of researching. I've said this in the past. I'm not against AI. I'm not against technology. I'm not against social media. I'm not against all these things. I think that there are tools for people to use, but they have to be used appropriately. They have to be used in a manner where you're not letting it control your life and you're also not letting it think for you. You're using it as a tool to add to your learning and growing and thinking. So I punch this into Google and just gives you the rundown of what's going on, just to let you guys see both sides of the spectrum and what's happening with this government shutdown, why it's happening right now. Going on for about a week so far, from October 1st. So we're starting off the month fresh with absolutely no government. And look, here we are a week later. Everybody's fine. Nothing's happening. Just goes to show you we really don't need a lot of the government. We really don't need a lot of them interfering in our lives the way they do. America was designed to be a self-governed nation. Yes, they have jobs to do, they have things that they have to manage, and operations that have to be run. But for the most part, the government is not necessary at the capacity that it's at. And sometimes I think that Trump is one of the only presidents that's actually willing to go through with the shutdown, even though it looks like a lot of other presidents would look at that as a stain on their reputation. Like, the government shuts down, everybody's going to be mad at me. And this is a game. Politics is a game of egos. So you get a lot of people who are going to say, well, that's going to hurt you for the midterms or for the next election or whatever. Well, all Trump has left is the midterms, and then he's done. He has no second election, a third election rather, coming up, and he's just focusing on the midterms to get more Republicans in, so that they can really have control over the House and the Senate and help Congress get a lot more of his agenda for the final 2 years of his term passed before he leaves office. And that's really the last thing that he has to worry about in terms of, you know, political nonsense that a lot of these politicians won't do the right thing because they're afraid of votes and crap like that, which really, if you just did a great job, and this is like time and time again, this is the way that it goes. People do this with work, people do this in life in general. You try to cut corners to please everybody, and you can't please everybody. The way that you do please everybody is to just do the best job you possibly can and to do everything, quote unquote, the right way. And you'll win over the majority of the people because people appreciate when somebody does stuff well. They appreciate quality, even if they don't like you or like your politics. Look how many Democrats agreed with a lot of the things that Trump did over the last, however many years that he's been president, including the first term. He agreed with a lot of things he did because he does it well. He does it with quality. He does things creatively that other politicians never thought to do because they don't have a business mindset. They don't think like an entrepreneur. So they play these games, but I don't really think Trump cares about the government shutdown. In fact, I think he likes to use it as leverage when it does get shut down to show the American people, number one, just how spiteful and political the other side can be if they don't get their way. They're willing to hurt their own voters just to get what they want. And then also so that they so that he can show the people just how irrelevant a lot of these, government politicians and offices are, that when they're not in work for a week, yeah, they affect certain people that work with them. If you have a government job, obviously it affects you. But for the most part, the average person who is a free market person, whether they're an entrepreneur, have their own business, or an employee of a private company, um, they don't really care and they don't really notice it. And that's a good thing that, you know, we get to see. Because sometimes you build it up in your head that things are going to be really bad if this happens. And then when it happens, nothing really actually affects you. And you realize you were just overthinking it. And I think sometimes that's his strategy, is to just show the people instead of telling them, show them. And this is what, has worked for him many times in the past. But government shutdown, current U.S. government is shut down due to failure between Republicans and Democrats to agree on the budget for the fiscal year, which is something they go through all the time. And a lot of times, especially under Trump, the Democrats have played these games where they threaten to shut down if they didn't get their way and get certain things passed in their bills. And he's always been one of the few presidents that actually stood up to them and said, just shut down, then we're not going to give you what you want. And it actually backfires on them, because then their constituents get mad at them because they shut down the government, which hurts them a little bit with some of the social programs and things like that. And they end up having to, come back to the table and renegotiate a deal. So I see that probably happening again with this one, where this is another time where Trump has more leverage and the Republicans have more leverage. There, where the Democrats are going to have to bend a knee and come back and accept the terms of the budget and maybe just negotiate one or two things that they get in their favor so they feel like they won something. Because again, this is a game of egos politics. But the shutdown began October 1st after Congress cannot pass the spending bill. Republicans' goal, spending cuts, are pushing for significant cuts to government spending, particularly targeting programs they view as wasteful, which is exactly what Trump has said over, the years, has been his agenda. And Elon Musk and Doge and all these people. And this is really what the Americans voted for. Enough is enough, man. We have so much national debt that's getting closer and closer to 40 trillion every day. It's getting worse for this country because that just further buries us. And the only way out of that is either to just walk away from it, but then you hurt these other countries that we're not, paying the money back to, and that overall hurts the world economy and it ruins our trade relations. Or you slowly pay it down with things like the tariffs and other stuff like that. But you can't print yourself out of debt. You can't add on more debt to get out of debt. The only way to get out of debt is to pay it down, or to, you know, file bankruptcy and wipe it away. But the truth is, as much as they say, oh yeah, they could just, America will file bankruptcy and wash the debt away, it doesn't really work like that with a country. It works like that in our system today, only because that's how we set it up, but it's really fictitious. What the debt doesn't just go away. It goes on the books as a write-off for that credit company, and then they end up getting to save that money in tax revenue, or it gets paid by the taxpayers, and it hurts the overall economy because it adds to the national debt that has to get paid down. It goes on our books. So it's really not a system where you really just can't walk away from debt. Debt has to be paid down. It's like a natural law, you know, something, it has to be met with an equal and opposite reaction. And you can't just, walk away from it and act like nothing happened, because something was still done for that. Like it's the same thing if, somebody does a job and you don't pay them. They still did the job. That work, product, good service, whatever, was still delivered to you. So you still have a real thing in reality that you get to walk away with. And their time and labor was used to accomplish that. If they don't get their payment, they're walking away with nothing. So they're left empty-handed and you have all the gain. And all it does is take a toll on them, because now they did the work for free. And, their body is, you know, further broken down. They had to spend money for, food and other things to continue to energize them during that time they did the job. So it's a chain reaction. Like, there are repercussions to that stuff. And obviously, sometimes it is what it is. People get into a bind and you can't get out of it, or you're in an economic situation where you just can't get past a certain level, and the only way out is to get to that point where you file bankruptcy, or you work out a deal or something to reduce the debt and do like a lump sum payout. It's understandable. Everybody's circumstance is different. You really can't do that. And as a major country, the number one superpower in the world, you really, really can't do that because you affect the whole world economy. But Republicans are trying to cut spending and Democrats are trying to increase spending. This has always been the way it is with, the way they play games. The conservative people are conservative for a reason. They're conservative. They conserve their money. They conserve their time, their energy, their whatever. Liberals are more free with that stuff. They don't care about blowing money and spending it and being wasteful because their philosophy on life is different. So conservatives are generally conservative because they are trying to, live a modest life and do things in a economically correct way. Not that they're perfect and they're, good people, but that economically correct. And so this is where the Democrats differ. And Republicans are guilty of overspending too, but Trump and his administration and the people he's picked seem to be very pro. Let's pay down the debt. Let's work towards generating more income for the country, like it's a company, and let's cut the fat where it needs to be cut. And obviously, the Democrats and some of the Republicans who are corrupt, like the rhinos, don't want that stuff because they like it. It's corruption. They've set up an infrastructure like USA, that's like basically a giant shell company. They set these things up to be able to, you know, get something off the back end, skim off the top. And, when you interfere with that, you're interfering with their lifestyle essentially because they've set up all this stuff so that they can, cheat the American people and get rich in the process. And this goes for both Democrats and Republicans. It's not just one-sided, but it definitely is more for the Democrat side. But they're trying to do the spending cuts, the Republicans, healthcare changes. The Republicans want to reduce funding for Medicaid and other health programs, which they argue are costly, and that's true. By the way, there are other solutions to that stuff. Medicaid, Medicare, health programs, all that stuff, they're definitely necessary for certain members of society. But we've gotten to a point where it's become expected of Americans to just get all that stuff just because. Well, I hit this age, I earned it. Well, I've got this going on, I deserve it. Or I'm an American, I deserve it just because I'm an American. And that's not the reality of life. It actually takes away from what we can do for other people who actually need it when people who don't are utilizing it as well just because. That's not the right way to go. Think about all of our elder population or disabled population. They need so many more resources for healthcare than your average person who goes to the gym and takes care of themselves. They should utilize those resources better by putting the resources that would go to everybody evenly across the board, like socialism, and instead focus those resources on the people who need it most. Then it wouldn't be such a big deal. And in fact, more people would be for it because nobody's going to say when you're perfectly healthy, you know, oh, don't take from me to give to this disabled person. Then you're a really crappy person and nobody would like you. And you are nobody would really be that way unless you're really an evil person and truly selfish at your core. This would only benefit people in the long run, where you work it out where and this is what they've done recently with the health savings accounts that a lot of companies have adopted now, where they let you take pre-tax dollars from your pay and you put it into this account and it's completely tax free in that regard. And you get to spend it on certain things to do with healthcare. That's a great idea. Also, Ben Carson had a good idea where he said everybody should get a health savings account from the time they're born. And instead of that expiring at the end of each year, which again is another racket because you're taking real money that's pre-taxed and you're putting it in a health savings account right now. Then at the end of the year, if you don't spend it, it goes away. Well, it doesn't go away. It goes to somebody and they're getting pre-tax dollars. It's like hedging a bet. If this person forgets they have it or they don't use it, we get to keep it. So we'll let them get away with having pre-tax dollars, but ultimately we're going to siphon some off the top in the end. That's another scam. But if you set it up like Ben Carson said, where it's pre-tax dollars, it goes into a health savings account, that's also an interest account, and it bears interest each year, that grows over time. So every time each person's born, they get an account with maybe $100 from the government, and it just goes into that account when they're born. It sits there, and then it grows over time with interest, which compounds year by year, by the way. And then you could add to it personally as the parents or whatever. When you get a job one day, you could have your job plug into that and add to it. And now you keep growing this account over time. It's a lot more efficient because if you go 10 years without having any issues, now you have this huge account with money. When something does come up, you don't have to turn to the government or Medicare or this or that to be able to take care of you and put that burden on the taxpayers because you already have all this money sitting in that account that you can use. And by the way, this is the type of thing that everybody's going to need to tap into at some point in their lives. Whether you're a kid and you break your leg, or you're an older person and you have a lot of health issues because you're getting older in life, you're going to need that money. You're going to have to tap into it at some time. So it won't just become useless for some people. It will be something that everybody needs at some point in their life. Then when you die, if there's still money left in the account, you can pass it on to the next generation so your heirs receive it and continue on. You're talking about solving multi-generational healthcare issues just by setting up a healthcare account at the time of birth of each American. This is a solution to a lot of these problems. So we don't have to have these games every year with the budget and Congress threaten to shut down the government over, because a lot of times it has to do with this crap. It has to do with healthcare. They'll say, we need more money for healthcare because these programs need to, get budgeted for. And, we have all these sick people, they need help. And you know that all of it's not going to them. A lot of it's going somewhere else. It's getting siphoned off the top and it's going to somebody. Not going to accuse anybody specifically, but there's definitely corruption in that. And that's why a lot of this stuff happens. But there's solutions to these problems that actually mostly only entrepreneurs can fix. And, you can solve a lot of these problems so that we don't have to keep having these issues and revisiting them every year and playing these political games and these ego games. So that's my take on that. But it's actually Ben Carson's idea. As far as I know, he's the first person that publicly said it a while ago, and it makes a lot more sense. And it really does help solve a lot of these healthcare issues that we've had as a nation, especially when you have a nation of so many sick people because of the food and the way that people live their lives, lifestyles, and stuff like that. All the more you need something like this. The last thing is tax credit extensions. Republicans are less focused on extending tax credits for health insurance, which is a priority for Democrats. So Democrats are demanding the extension of the expiring tax credits to make health insurance more affordable for millions. They oppose cuts to Medicaid and other health services, arguing these programs are essential for vulnerable populations. And then Democrats are seeking a more collaborative approach to budget negotiations, emphasizing the need for balanced solutions that protects healthcare funding. So again, it's funny the way that Google or whatever source this is words this. It words as though it's in favor of the Democrats' goals rather than the Republicans. The truth is, at the end of the day, these two both have points, these two groups of people. And they both have things that are fair, that seem like it would be the best interest for the American people. And they both have things that are selfish and clearly political games that they're playing. But they can come to a resolution on a lot of these things if they would just stop playing these political games and truly just do what's best for the American people. And I think for the most part, Trump and the people he picked are trying to, and a lot of the stay over Republicans and the Democrats that are in there for a while are not, and they're corrupted in their own ways. But they're a dying breed of people because we're going to enter into a wave of new politicians that are coming up now. You see a lot of these people that are older. A lot of people, I think, especially in the conspiracy world, are thinking that the Trump's going to come in on a white horse and he's going to save the day and arrest all the crooked politicians and they're all going to go to jail and then everything's going to be happy-go-lucky, and that's the end of the story. It's a fairy tale, and that's just not the reality of life. What's more real is a lot of these politicians that are super corrupt are older because they've been in for a while and they've built and established this corruption system. But they're much older, in their 70s and 80s, some are even in their 90s. They're going to just die off and just move on to the next phase of their life. And those seats are going to be filled by other people that are younger, especially part of the millennial generation now, because they're in those age brackets where they're ready for this type of job, and they're going to start filling those roles, and they're going to start being independents. They're going to start being, conservatives and Democrats, but a lot more center than the way that a lot of these older Democrats and conservatives are, where they're way too far right or way too far left. And so we're going to go through a season of politicians changing seats and younger people coming in and doing, a better job to come together at the table and negotiate deals that are truly better for the American people. Not saying that, none of these people are going to be corrupt and that they're not going to, few that get in, that carry on, continue on the mission of the evil people that were in there before them. I am going to say that I see a future soon, especially starting with these midterm elections coming up, where you're going to see a wave of politicians getting out of politics. The old corrupt ones are going to be washed away, and the new ones are going to roll in, and they're going to do a better job. And it's going to be a new era of politicians that are going to be more focused on actually doing right by the American people and bringing this country back to being a better place. I've also said this in the past. My prediction is, and I could be wrong, and that's perfectly fine, I'm willing to take the loss on that, is that I think your next politician, your next president is going to be Ron DeSantis. And I think that he's going to pick up the torch of what Trump did, and he's going to carry it on to the next two terms where he continues to do a similar style of what Trump was doing, but it's going to be much more analytical. It's going to be more actually getting in there and changing the laws and fixing the laws and getting rid of the corruption, but also at a core level where he's doing it in the books. He's getting rid of the laws that contradict the Constitution, and he's putting in laws that are the correct, like laws that are already on the books that are not enforced. He's going to enforce those. He's going to, um, you know, maybe bring in some new laws, push for Congress to pass those laws that are going to be better for the American people. He's probably going to do a lot better job from a technical standpoint than the way that Trump does it. Trump's more of a, people person. He's more like a networker and an entrepreneur, and he goes out there and he makes the deals and he shakes the hands and he gets it done. Ron DeSantis is never going to be able to match Trump in that regard. But I think he's going to do a better job than Trump when it comes to the actual books, diving into the books and correcting a lot of wrongs that contradicted the way this nation was founded. And, you know, the actual laws that are on the books and the actual things that are in the Constitution and the original design and infrastructure of this country. So that's my prediction. I think that's going to happen. I also think when the midterms come up this time around, the Republicans are going to win a lot more seats and they're going to have a much bigger majority in Congress than they have in a long time. And that's going to help them get a lot of this stuff done so that when Ron DeSantis comes in, he's going to do a much better job. Also, when he comes in, that's another election where Congress changes seats. So he might even pick up a few more Republican seats then as well. And then it's just going to make it all the more easy for him to get that job done. So that's my prediction with that stuff. We'll see what happens. It's still, I guess 2.5 years away, a little bit less. And we will see what actually comes to fruition because it's so early still. Nothing's been announced. Ron has made no accusations about running. This is just a prediction I'm making because it seems like that's the logical path for what God's plan is for this nation to continue to the next phase in the next generation. And that gives us about 8 good years, mostly of rebuilding America and turning things back away from socialism and that path we were leading towards communism, and then righting a lot of the wrongs on the books, a lot of technical things. So that's just my prediction with that stuff. But we're just taking a look at this right now with the government shutdown. Then I'm going to jump into a solution that Trump came up with, which maybe he came up with somebody else on his team. I don't know, but it seems like a brilliant idea. And this is all the more reason why he came up with this whole tariff thing. But we're going to take a look at that now. So this is one of his ideas, is to use the tariff revenue to save the WIC program during the government shutdown. And this again, it shows you his business and entrepreneur mindset. A business person is always thinking strategy long term, especially when you've been in business as many decades as he has. You set things up for 10-year blocks. So you'll do things and you'll say, well, within this 10-year frame of time, I think we should be here. Let's start working towards getting there. And what do we have to do each year, each quarter, each month in order to get closer to that goal? And that's how business people think, is, building towards things, not having shiny object syndrome and doing what want right now because that's how you feel, but rather going by a longer plan and saying, this is our 5-year plan, this is our 10-year plan, this is our 20-year plan. Let's keep working towards that. Because when you get older and when you're in your business for a little bit, you actually learn that life happens quick. And this is a famous saying. I didn't make it up, but it totally hits the nail on the head. Underestimate You overestimate what you could do in 1 year, but you underestimate what you could do in 10 years. And that's so true. You really do think you can accomplish a lot more in a year. At least most people do. And you get all excited and happy, especially like people on diets. You think, I'm going to lose 50 pounds this month because I want to be 50 pounds lighter. And then when the month ends and you lost 5 pounds or 7 pounds, you get all discouraged and you give up. A business person, entrepreneur doesn't think like that. They think, okay, my goal is by this date to lose this much. Let's start working towards that. Milestone number one is this marker. When I get here, I want to at least lose this much. And you build towards that thing. And you realize over time, things unfold, but nothing happens in an instant. This is why most people are successful in business, why most people who are successful in business are successful, and why most people don't succeed at business or fail, because they don't have the ability to think long term and play things out. When Trump put in these tariffs, it wasn't just to bring in money to the American people and make this country rich off of other countries' money. It was to correct a lot of the wrongs that were going on, where other countries weren't paying their fair share, but we were paying them, or we were, supporting them and their agendas. It was also to set up a long-term plan where we don't lean on the government so much to solve our problems. And if we don't play by their rules, they use their leverage against us to get their way. The tariffs set up the infrastructure where we don't need to rely on the government to, do all these things to get what they want. Otherwise, the tax revenues that not there, and then they use that as leverage because we have the tariff money to lean on. And so that's exactly what Trump did. He used the tariff stuff as leverage. He says, well, the government shut down. No problem. Here's my solution. We're going to take a portion of the tariff money and we're going to float the WIC program until the government shutdown ends, and then we can reinstate everything. But in the meantime, we have a backup. It's like setting up a reserve account for your business where you have a backup account for emergencies in case something happens. You have to lean on that account for a little bit and take from it. And then when things go back to normal, you go back to using the typical operating account and you start rebuilding what you took out of the backup savings account. You replenish that so that you have it again for the next emergency. That's what smart strategic entrepreneurs do, and that's how Trump is. And so this whole tariff thing is smart because it's multifaceted. It's not just bringing in money to the country to make us rich. It's also to pay down the debt. It's also to, you know, uses leverage against government overreach so that we don't just, rely on them and their games. It's also to take away from Americans having to pay so much in taxes and offset that with the tariffs. It's multifaceted. So great idea by Trump, but we'll just read this real quick. The White House has announced that it will use the tariff revenue to fund the special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children, WIC. That's what that stands for. Amid the ongoing government shutdown, the program is crucial for over 6 million low-income families, providing them with food vouchers, breastfeeding support, and nutrition education. So, great idea by Trump. Great job on that. And, I hope it works. Let's just read the dollar amount. So it says, while the exact amount has not been disclosed, the WIC program had a budget of approximately 7.6 billion for fiscal year 2025, costing about 146 million per week, but the tariff revenue was in the billions, tens of billions now that Trump has brought in from all this stuff. So they have the money there to actually float this program. 7.6 billion is actually not that much compared to what the tariffs brought in for 2025 alone already. And by the end of the year, it's possible that it will be, you know, somewhere in the realm of one full year cycle. Not because it didn't actually start at the beginning of the year, January 1st, but in a full year cycle, it's possible that the tariff revenue might bring in $1 trillion a year annually. So, you're bringing that in, you take that money. If you don't need all of it, you can pay down the debt with it, but you could also put a lot of it into, accounts that earn interest and then grow that money so that you pay the interest towards the debt and things like that. But our interest alone on the national debt is $1 trillion a year. So we really need as much of that money that can go towards the debt as possible. And then as this continues to grow, plus the economy, plus taxes, you might actually break the interest only payment and pay down towards the principal as well. Anyway, that's on that. Now let's take a look at one last thing, which is all we really have time for today. Trump mulling $2,000 dividend for Americans to share money made from the tariffs. So this is one I'm not too crazy about. It seems like he's just using it as leverage to convince the American people because he's giving them free money to, be happy about the whole tariff situation, sell them on that because now it's real, it's tangible, they can see it and feel it with the money that was given to them. And then also maybe incentivize them to vote in a certain way during the midterms. I don't like the idea of giving people money from the government, free money, even if it is, for like paybacks for them paying too much in taxes over the years as like a gift return. But it's not a great idea because we still have so much debt and we still have so many, programs that we need to fund, and especially with the government shutdown and all these other things, you want to take that money and you want to really pay it as much as possible towards the debt so that the debt starts to go down and people start to actually see, wow, we're making a dent with this debt. It's actually starting to get paid down for the first time in a long time. It's being reversed. This is incredible. What he's doing is working. Let's keep this going, like almost like, get the machine, the momentum going, and then we'll see where this thing snowballs to. But when you give people free money and the debt's still what it is, or maybe even keeps going up, it just sends a bad message. And it's the same thing as having a credit card with a bunch of debt on it, and then you get a bonus from work, and instead of taking that and paying it towards the credit card, you go on a shopping spree when you have this other debt that you need to, pay down from stuff that you already bought that you couldn't afford. You're going to go now and buy more stuff that you can't afford, but with the cash that you got, rather than allocating it towards the right area that needs to be taken care of. So I just think it's a bad idea. I don't think he should be giving any of the tariff money to the American people directly. I think that should be going towards the debt and paying it down and showing the American people that this plan will work long term. And if we just keep building on this, because don't forget, he only has like 2.5 years left. This needs to continue on after he's gone. Otherwise, it was just a short-lived experiment that one president tried, and it goes down in the history books. We need to see where this goes in 10 years of collecting tariffs and paying down the debt. Did it actually work? Did it make a dent? Did it start to reverse the national debt? And that would actually put all of Americans in a better economic situation because you don't have this debt hanging over your head. So we could do so much more if they would just right all these wrongs. And Americans would actually feel a lot better. The pressure would be off the companies as much, and they would actually, it would free them up to give people better pay raises and salaries and things like that. I think he should take all that money and I think he should allocate it towards paying down the debt. And then once the debt really starts to get paid down, because it'll probably never go away completely because it's an ongoing thing. We keep making deals, we keep borrowing, we keep this, that. So we're always going to have some level of debt there, but it should work more as rolling credit, where you take a certain amount of debt out, you get money in from the tariffs, you pay it off. Then you take new debt out, get money in from the tariffs, pay it off. Not building to the pile of debt and then never ever paying down the original stuff that we took out, but then adding to it even more, even though we have money coming in from tariffs and taxes and things like that. That's not good economics. That's not going to go well for Americans long term. And it's going to end up bankrupting many different social programs that'll have a chain reaction, which will hurt Americans overall, especially as the millennials and Gen X and so Gen Z get older into their retirement ages. But that's pretty much it. That's my take on this stuff with the government shutdown and some of Trump's ideas to combat this stuff using the tariffs that he set up. Stay tuned for the next episode. We're definitely going to have a interesting conversation with the tradesmen, and we're going to talk about this specific, industry, and hopefully shed some light on it from a perspective that maybe a lot of the younger people don't really know, because not that many people are talking about these type of jobs, especially anymore with shows like Dirty Jobs no longer on the air. There's really not many areas you can go to learn about this stuff. And this is not going to be the channel where you learn about it exclusively. There are, I'm sure, tradesmen out there that also have channels that all they do is talk about their trade. And that's a great way to go learn about those things in case you're, interested in going down that direction as a career path in life, especially when you're young and you're in high school or college and you're trying to decide your future. This is just to, give a different perspective. So it should be a good interview. Hopefully, all goes well and we'll actually get it done. But then if that's the case, we will have that as the next episode. So stay tuned for that. Check out the ad at different ads at the end of this video to support the show, support the channel, because we're going to continue to do more of these in the future. We're going to do interviews. We're going to do all different types of things. Eventually, we're going to build the podcast studio and, have it be a lot better quality than it is now. I know there's a lot of technical difficulties, but that's the beginning of a shoestring budget for a very small infant podcast, and perfectly fine by me. It's more about the content itself than the quality of everything at this stage of the game. And hopefully you agree, because the channel's continuing to grow. We are continuing to increase subscribership and views and all that stuff. So happy about that. Thank you for supporting. But don't forget to actually, purchase some things from the apparel shop. A percentage of the profits from that goes to different charities to help them out. These are all great charities that are legitimate. The book that I wrote, the children's book, is on sale right now. Definitely start getting it for the holidays, as we're in the fall now. So you got, less than a month really to start getting orders in for a lot of these products to get them in time for Christmas as gifts for people. So check that out. Check out the Amazon storefront. We've got a ton of stuff on there that we highly recommend. We use ourselves, and a lot of them will make for great gifts. There's also Prime Day going on right now, today, and I think yesterday or tomorrow. So you can save money on a lot of those items in our store. So take a look at all that stuff. Purchase stuff that makes sense to you and you actually find value in, and hopefully you get value out of that and the products and this channel as well. And put in the comments anything that you want to see, any topics you want to see me talk about, any guests you'd like to see me try and have, anything, any of your thoughts. This is an open forum where we can have a conversation and discuss things and come to reasonable conclusions. So that's hopefully what I'm looking to build this channel into, is a forum for people to have open debate, have conversations, and disagree, which is fine, just not turn into chaos of name calling and bullying and all that nonsense, but just having good conversations to get to the bottom of things, and work together as a society to agree on how we want to live in the future, what we want this country to look like. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for the next one. All right, everybody, I just want to take a moment to promote my children's book. This is Little Boy Full of Love. That's me on the back. And this is a little sneak peek on the inside. It's a great book. It's a children's book. I actually wrote this for my son, and it's available right now on Amazon, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, bookshop.org, and a lot of other online platforms. But more importantly to me, it's actually available in a lot of bookstores throughout the country. You can find out which ones are closest to you on my Instagram page. We highly recommend that you shop local, buy from a local bookstore. So if you are looking to, get a children's book for you or anybody you know, or even with the holidays coming up, it's a great time to, buy a children's book as a gift. Definitely get it from a bookstore that's local to you. But if you absolutely can't get it from one of the bookstores that are currently carrying it right now, and we're in about 15 or 16 different states across the country, so it may actually be in your state, and it could even be local to you. But if you can't get it from the physical bookstore, check out our Amazon storefront. The book's available on there right now, and like I said, with the holidays coming up, you may want to do your Christmas or Hanukkah or holiday shopping early, and you can even order it from our Amazon storefront and ship it directly to whoever you're gifting it to. But it's available on those platforms, Amazon storefront and bookstores and other websites that I mentioned. But I want to take a moment here to look at the storefront just to give you an idea of some other stuff that we have available on there. These are products that we highly recommend. They are things that we use in our daily lives, and it's all organized by category. So it's a lot easier to, shop for the holidays and specifically for things that interest you, particular categories. Available right now, many different items on our storefront. If you can see here, 61 items just in women's apparel, fall decor, because right now we're in fall, 26 items, kitchen items, baking specifically, things for around the house, children's toys, even stuff for parties. If you're trying to save money on a party and throwing your own, occasion, you can even buy some cool gadgets here to help you, put on a better party. Health and wellness items here, even stuff for Christmas. And there's the book right there. So you can get it from the storefront. You can get it from the bookstores, like I mentioned. But it's available on all these different platforms. It's really easy to find and gift to somebody. Also, I want to show you the apparel shop, and these are some clothing items that we actually produced. So if you're looking to get some cool apparel items, shirts, hoodies, long sleeve, short sleeve, leggings, even accessories, cell phone cases, women's makeup bags, fanny packs, coffee mugs, all different types of stuff, even some, art, all different categories here, apparel, homeware, accessories, drinks, even digital items. It's all on this store, healthybodygoodssoul.com. Anything that pertains to you or somebody that you're looking to get a gift for the holidays. A lot of great designs on here, a lot of cool designs that we actually custom created. Stainless steel water bottles, especially now with the fall and winter. A lot of cool hoodies and long sleeve shirts. This is a really cool one, I think, for women. The original Be Your Soul apparel, that one's actually really popular. People tend to like that. This one's one of my favorites. The free shirt. It's the American flag and it says free and that says not property of the United States government. That one's pretty cool. Got all different types of tank tops, hoodies, long sleeve, short sleeve, tote bags, coffee mugs, even some items for kids, backpacks. So if you're the type that likes to, plan ahead, I would definitely recommend ordering from the Amazon storefront or the apparel shop within the next couple of weeks to get everything in time for the holidays. Use code SAVE15 on the apparel shop to save 15% off everything on the storefront. So order within the next week or two and you'll definitely have everything in time for the holidays. Definitely check out all the links to everything, the Amazon storefront, the book, and the apparel shop in my bio on all my platforms, Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify. But you can also find them in all the show notes for every episode that I post and get all your orders in time for the holidays. All right, that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It helps the channel continue to grow. And put in the comments things that you would like me to talk about and make videos on for the future. And I will definitely do my best to do that. Stay tuned for the next one.